Josh Giddey gets benched, and Zach LaVine also has one of his worst games on the season at the early part of the season. We're also going to talk about Billy Donovan's comments on the Chicago Bulls' new play style, and we all got to start asking the question. Is the Bulls' new play style fun, but is it winnable basketball? We'll talk a little bit about that, plus an injury update to Lonzo Ball and the mailbag. All that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host here, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this content today, y'all. I want to start off with a lot of things, a lot of the reactions from Josh Giddey getting benched yesterday. Josh Giddey played a bad game yesterday. And, I get it that Josh Giddey has his fans in his stands, as every player does. But I think objectively you can look at this game and say that this is one of Josh Giddey's worst games, period. It just was. The offense wasn't there. The defense was absolutely atrocious. And one thing that Josh Giddey is that when his defense isn't on, and it's not going to be on regularly, like that's not a slight. I think at this point we all know that Josh Giddey is not a good defensive player. But I think recently a lot's been made over Josh Giddey and if he finishes games or not. And even some fans saying, well, how's he going to learn to finish games if you don't put him out there to finish games? And I think when it comes down to it, this team is still trying to win those games. So they're going to go off and use their best lineups if they're trying to win the game. If this was a solely development season for the Bulls where they were maybe focused on strictly development and keeping their draft pick, they haven't shown that yet, maybe Josh Giddey would be out there, right? I even said it in an episode I did that I think it needs to be explored that Josh Giddey out there more with Ayo Dosunmu, because that's where like the offense and defense kind of balance, and even Josh Giddey's passing has helped Ayo Dosunmu definitely kind of be in better rhythm offensively as well. But yesterday, Josh Giddey just didn't have it, and he admitted it after the game. And I love the clarity that Josh Giddey has on it, the honesty that he has on it, saying this: I wouldn't have played myself if I was Billy either. I was bad at both ends. I want to be better on the defensive side of the ball, and I thought I was making steps in the right direction. To have a night like tonight kind of kills your confidence. I have to be way better and will be going forward. And listen, yes, I mean, it's good that Josh Giddey has that recollection, right? That he understands that he needs to be better on both sides of the ball. And even him saying, hey, I would have benched myself too, right? And that's like I said, a level of clarity, a level of just honesty that is kind of refreshing. But it does not overtake or overcome the fact that you got to be better on the field, Josh Giddey. You just have to be better when you're on that basketball court. And, it says a lot that Josh Giddey has always gotten like over 20 minutes. The fact that he played 15 in a game like this, because his defense was just god-awful. It was god-awful. There was nothing in what Josh Giddey did on the defensive side of the ball that his offense last night could overcome. And you saw his confidence shaking. And, I said in the post-game show as well to not blame that just on Giddey, because, like, they made some intentional defensive situations last night where it's like Billy Donovan was trying to get Josh Giddey cooked, like purposely switching Josh Giddey on to Donovan Mitchell. I get it that Josh Giddey has more length and height than Donovan Mitchell. And maybe you could try to, convince yourself that maybe, hey, this link can make Donovan Mitchell uncomfortable. But Zach LaVine's done a pretty good job on Donovan Mitchell. Not great. He hasn't shut him down, but he's done a pretty good job. Ayo Dosunmu's done a pretty good job. Kobe did some pretty good jobs defending Donovan Mitchell at times, but I think he's better on Darius Garland, because he likes to use his length as well on Darius Garland. But I think overall, like, it's just when you saw the possessions that Josh Giddey was switched on Donovan Mitchell, you saw this kid's confidence get completely ripped from his body early into that game, and he was never able to overcome that. And it was his worst game in a Chicago Bulls uniform. 15 minutes, 2 of 9 shooting from the field, 1 of 5 from 3-point range as well out there. And it wasn't good. It just wasn't good. And we saw this was the most close to what we saw of how his career ended with OKC, right? And so, he's averaging more, right? You look at it, he's only 0.6 points less with a team with a lot more scores. His shooting splits have been a lot better as far as the percentages. But I think what we're seeing as well is that Josh Giddey was on that OKC Thunder team, which was a lot more defensively sound than the Chicago Bulls. So even where he got picked on in that OKC defense with them having Shea and Chet and those type of players out there, it's being even louder now in a Bulls team that isn't the best defensively. Like it just isn't, right? His defensive box plus minus is the worst of his career. It's the worst of his career. And the overall box plus minus is the second worst of his career, only second to his rookie season. And that's why the box score stats and analytics have to really be married together. Because, yes, Josh Giddey statistically and averages is having a solid season for who and the player that Josh Giddey is. He is. But the impact on the game, right? And that's where you have to separate what you individually average versus the impact it's having on your team. And while Josh Giddey, he's averaging 12.5 points per game now. He's 40% from three, which is the highest of his career. He's taken the most three-pointers he has in his career as well. 41% from the field, which has taken a big hit over the last couple of games from Josh Giddey. But he's 6.5 rebounds. 6.5 assists, the most of his career. 6 rebounds. It is the lowest of his career, but he's on a much more sound rebounding team as well with having Vooch out there. Kobe's a solid rebounder for a guard. Isles a solid rebounder for a guard. So, it is what it is when it comes down to that. I think those rebound numbers are going to go up some. But you cannot mistake how bad Josh Giddey was last night. It was terrible. And it was unplayable. And this is the first game we could say it was completely unplayable because usually he's getting other players involved in some type of way to where even if you're not going to close him, you can understand why you have him out there in certain minutes. But Josh Giddey was unplayable last night. And I hope that he uses this to really kind of work on some things. And we got a voicemail on what Josh Giddey needs to do, so I'm not going to go into in depth there, but it was a bad game from Josh Giddey. But he wasn't the only one. It was a bad game from Zach LaVine as well. Now, I've talked with or had comments from ATS where it was like, oh, well, Josh Giddey doesn't play and Zach LaVine has his worst game. There's a correlation there. You can't blame Josh Giddey's defense. I'm sorry, but that's stupid. When you look at a team and you look at the overall impact, this is why you got to look at averages over impact. Josh Giddey and Zach LaVine are not part of any plus lineups except one that has played a very few amount of possessions together. And so, yes, Josh Giddey's defense is impacting. The fact that you can say, even if you do want to make the conversation that Josh Giddey is having a positive impact on Zach LaVine's offense, which I'm not saying he doesn't, you cannot overlook the negative impact overall of Josh Giddey on the floor defensively. And that is where it's getting interesting. And that goes back to, again, but we knew who Josh Giddey was, right? But it goes back to you have to manage your lineups and your minutes in a way to where you can help kind of lessen some of these mistakes that other players make or shortcomings that other players make. But as to get back into the point, Zach LaVine had his worst game of the season. 4 of 16 from the field, 8 points. Now, he did facilitate decently well. 9 assists, only 1 turnover for Zach LaVine, so he actually did really good when you look at his usual assist-to-turnover ratio. And there's something to be said about Zach LaVine having a better recognition this year over when his shot's not falling, let me get other players involved. And that is helping this team, right? So there is something with that. 4 rebounds, 1 block overall, and Zach LaVine didn't have it either, and he recognized it early. But it was a bad game from Zach LaVine, and overall that helped doom the Chicago Bulls. And through 13 games this season, the Chicago Bulls have 3 games with 20 or more three-pointers. The franchise record for a season is 4. So that means that through 13 games, they're going to blow past what the franchise record is for games with 20 or more three-pointers. Now, it's a modern NBA. Three-pointers are going to be a lot more when it comes down to it. When you also look at the assists, the Bulls have had 30 or more assists in 7 of the 13 games so far, and 3 games with 20 or more three-pointers combined, right? So at the end of the day, the Bulls are trying that new play style, right? And Billy Donovan said this about the play style. I love the way we're trying to play and the commitment we're making physically to the game. I love the way we're sharing the ball and pushing it up the floor. And that is where it gets to the next part of the conversation that I want to have. The Bulls are playing a very fun brand of basketball. But unfortunately, they're giving up way more points than what they're averaging. So the point differential is there. And it's like, it's style over substance right now for the Bulls. And that's why, when people say things like, well, the Bulls can be a top 6 team or the Bulls can win 40 games and look at what we're doing offensively. But yeah, look at how bad we are defensively. The Chicago Bulls are a terrible defensive team. There's just no way around that. The Bulls are bad defensively. And they don't really have right now anything like, you can play with the lineup so much, right? Try to get the best combination of players out there. But when it comes down to it, you just don't have those type of of defenders that really you're going to be like the turnovers. Yes, that's killing the Bulls. Make no mistake about it. And that goes into the play style as well. Yeah, you're playing fast, but you're playing sloppy. And that's not going to get you really anything. Playing fast just to play fast is the exact opposite of what I wanted for this Bulls team. I didn't want this to be a Bulls team that just played fast and run and gun. I wanted this to be a Bulls team that played more up-tempo with more intention. And right now, the Bulls are allowing the second most points per game in the NBA. 122.2 points per game, only second to the Washington Wizards. That's it. Only second to the Washington Wizards. The Bulls are allowing way too many points. And so while the style of the offense is good, it's fun to watch. I talk about the brand of basketball. Like the Bulls have a top 10, top 12 as far as points per game scored. That's great. But when you're sloppy with it, also when you allow easy buckets in the paint, when you foul too much as well, which is something that's starting to become a problem for this team as well, is the number of personal fouls. When you do those type of things, it's going to be difficult to win basketball games. It just is. You can't allow the second most points in the NBA while also averaging the second most turnovers in the NBA while averaging the most points allowed in the paint in the NBA and expect yourself to be a winning basketball team. So while the Bulls' new play style is great and it is modern and the numbers do show that. Number one in pace, right? Getting up a lot of three-pointers and actually hitting the three-pointers at a decent enough percentage, right? They're not the best three-point shooting team in the league, but, we're much better than what we've been. We're in the top 6 teams as far as three-point shooting percentage at almost 38%. So, yeah, you're having some success in that, but the substance is missing, right? Style over substance. And right now, this is a Bulls team that, A, is still learning how to win games. That's evident for this team. And that's another thing that I did expect coming into the season, especially with missing DeMar DeRozan and what he's meant for closing games for this Bulls team. I thought it was going to be evident that we were going to be a team that was going to struggle in close games, and the games have been close. Now, there's something to be said with how much the Bulls are averaging as far as giving up, that we're still in a lot of these games. Like, the Bulls were in this game against the Cleveland Cavaliers with a little over 2 minutes left. It was a 4-point game. And then they got out to I think it was like a 21-7 run or something like that to finish the game. So we just don't know how to close games right now. Now, maybe that fixes itself over the season. Maybe they're learning on the fly, things like that. But right now, the Chicago Bulls play style, this new play style that is, admittedly, it is fun to watch the Bulls when they're in rhythm offensively. But the wins aren't there, right? And the Bulls are going to fluctuate with the Eastern Conference still kind of normalizing itself. Yeah, the Bulls were 6th at one point. We dropped all the way down to 10th now, right? And that's still with teams like Charlotte. Do they start playing better? The Milwaukee Bucks have now won 2 in a row, right? The Philadelphia 76ers, if they ever get it together, they're going to shoot up there as well. We don't know if that's actually going to happen as it get closer and closer, as the season goes on and on, I should say. Are the Brooklyn Nets going to stay as hot as they are too, right? They're now coming back down to earth. They're 4-6 in the last 10. They lost 2 in a row. But I think overall, when you look at that top 6 teams in the Eastern Conference, right, it's starting to kind of look like how we expected it to look. All those teams are on winning streaks. Cleveland, Boston, Orlando, New York, right? Miami's now in the top 6. These are teams that I expected to be there. The Pacers, we'll see if they can get there, if they can turn some things around. You got a team like the Atlanta Hawks right now that I think, I didn't expect to be this good this early. Then you got a team like the Detroit Pistons as well that are playing really good basketball. Overall, they're 6-4 in their last 10. So the Bulls are going to, be a fun team to watch. But I don't think they're going to be a team that's going to win at a high enough level. And that's what AK and Eversley got to evaluate. And when you have Bulls fans saying things like, let's not move Zach or Vooch, let's add to them and stuff like that, that's a tall proposition for a team that is trying to get out of being mediocre. And I know nobody wants to see the Bulls lose. Nobody wants to go into a season where the Bulls are expected to win 25 games. Nobody wants that. But you got to ask yourself, even if you can't fall in love with the fool's gold. You just can't. And that's what this team has done at times prior in previous years. And even with health being a thing, we'll see though. We'll see how it goes. And then talking about health brings us to the last topic before we get into the voicemail. I dropped an emergency episode on the YouTube channel with this, but with the game going on, I forgot to drop it as a podcast. I'm going to talk about it here. Is that, Billy Donovan came out with Lonzo Ball and said that he's now projecting that Lonzo miss at least another week. And he actually added some clarity that we did not have before. He did say that the team doctors initially gave him a range of between 2 weeks and 6 weeks for Lonzo Ball's recovery. So when the Bulls gave that 10-day evaluation, and they did not say he'd return, they did say he'd be reevaluated in 10 days. And I think some Bulls fans take saying be reevaluated as he's going to be back. And so he was reevaluated. It didn't work out. So right now, Billy Donovan said maybe at least another week. But when you pair that with the doctors initially giving a prognosis of 2 to 6 weeks, and like I always say, Lonzo Ball has tended to always be a player that's a little bit behind that projectional. He's a slow healer. Look out for Lonzo Ball to maybe miss a lot more time. And I hope that's not the case. He was out there getting up shots before the New York game and this game against Cleveland. And, Billy Donovan did add that the dribbling's okay. It's just shooting long range, and the hard part for him is the right hand. It's his shooting hand, his dominant hand. And then again, when I say next week, I'm not saying he's playing next week. It's where he needs another week here. So we'll see. Lonzo Ball could be missing some extended time. But like I said before, they said that it was near a grade 3 sprain, which would have needed surgery and ended his season. So if they caught it early, and had they not, his season probably would have ended. So Lonzo's probably going to miss some time, an extended amount of time. And I'm glad that Billy Donovan said, not saying that return in a week, that's when he'll be reevaluated again. So we'll see where that is. But it is Saturday. That means it is Mailbag Day here. Let's go ahead and get into these voicemails. This one's from Brian Washington.
Yo, Haize, what up? Hey, this B from the West Side. Hey, to me, man, and I'm going to say this, keep on saying it, man. It's the coaching, bro. Billy Donovan, he may be a good coach, but not for this team. He's not a good coach. His rotation sucks. Like you said, his rotation sucks. And he sat there and watched Cleveland bench players come back, take the lead, and he watched it until they got the fucking lead. Just watched it. Like, bro, you ain't going to adjust to this? You ain't going to put your players back in? Our benches wasn't doing it. Put the guys back in. THC was out there too fucking long. He was out there too long in the game when they was going into their little slump. Put it like this. This thing, the exact team, Popovich, Eric Spoelstra, coaches like that, will have this team playing way better. It's the Bulls' whole organization. It's weak. The coach look weak. Their development team is weak. They develop the coaches who's developing these players, their whole system is fucking weak, bro. It's weak. It's trash. And I'm a diehard Bulls fan. I don't want to watch this shit. I don't want to watch them try to win lottery picks because we ain't even doing shit with the fucking picks that we got. Our young guys, we got a nice young core. We ain't developing them. So what's the use of going to get Cooper Flag to make him look bad? Because that's exactly what the fuck they gonna do with this coaching, this style, this shit they got going on. It's fucking trash, bro. I like to make up the team, but a better coach will coach the shit out of this team. And the Bulls, they probably have more wins. It's Billy to me. The players get some blame, but it's the coaching. He don't even build them up to even want to play. They look, the body language sometimes is like, I don't want to fucking be here. That's what they look like to me sometimes. And that's what he looks like, chewing that fucking gum. But that's my thoughts on that, man. I was just watching the show. But I have a good one.
All right, so this was left after the first game against Cleveland, and THT only played 1 minute. And so I get where people, because he did give up like 6 points in that 1 minute, but to say that he was left out on the court too long, no, he played like shit. That's what it was. He made mistakes. But yeah, I do think that Billy Donovan has to be better at coaching. He just does, right? And I think that a coach better, like you go to Spoelstra and Pop, yeah, you expect those teams to be those coaches to coach you to more wins. But let's be clear here, right? Like we're like the Miami Heat are struggling so far this season. They're starting to turn it around now that Jimmy Butler's out, but they're starting to struggle last season. And the Bulls had only 7 less wins than they did last year, with that being a more talented and a better coach team. Let's also go to the San Antonio Spurs, right? We all know that they only had 22 games last year. Now, here's what I'll say. Yes, a better coach gets you more wins, but Brian Washington, the thing where me and you have kind of disagreed over the last, little bit of time is that this team is not a team that's set up to win games. Like, yeah, if you had a better coach, it would, but then where you are, you're still at a place where you're still a playing team. Maybe at that point with a better coach like Pop or Spo, you're making it out the first round. Maybe they can coach you to that because they're just such good coaches at rallying guys, but the Bulls still have a talent deficit. And we still have a defensive deficit. And we still have a roster that just does not make a lot of sense. So, yes, the players deserve more than some of the blame, as you alluded to, because Billy Donovan isn't coaching them to have 20 turnovers per game. He's not coaching them to do that. I guarantee you there's not one play in Billy Donovan's playbook that says turn the ball over here. That's player execution, and that's a big reason why this team is getting hurt. The points in the paint, that's more of a I look at that as that's a personnel problem, and that's more on AK. But the turnovers, right? That's terrible. Now, Billy can do a lot better job, and I've talked about it on balancing the rotations for sure, but I think that this is not the season where it's just Billy Donovan. Billy Donovan makes some bad mistakes out there, and he makes some head-scratching ones, especially as far as developing or building confidence in your young players. But I think overall, like, it's not just coaching out there either. And these players aren't executing, and they're getting sloppy. They're getting sloppy. But, I think overall, yeah, you need a better coach for development, if nothing else. And we'll see what happens with this Bulls team at the end of the season and where they evaluate it. But great voicemail as always, Brian. Thank you for leaving that. Let's get into this next one. This one's from Shay.
Hey, what's up? This Shay. Look, man, I'm going to go on here to say it after this game. I'm sorry, bruh. I know he ain't going to continue to have bad games like this, but Josh Giddey needs to go to the bench, bruh. Look, I understand that that's not what we traded him for, but at the end of the day, man, you can see the bench gives us energy, but the offense is not really organized too much as it is with the starters. And I think he could benefit off the bench more, because when you look at the bench, we got more defenders than what we do on the start lineup. The way I see it, he needs a lot of covering for him, and that's why, he gets exposed a lot on the defensive end. I just believe that he could help benefit the bench, and the bench can help benefit him. I know you may not see it that way, but when you got guys like Julian Phillips, Dalen Terry, and Smith who really like can't create their own shots, you definitely gonna need a guy like Josh Giddey on that coming off that bench, especially with Lonzo Ball being out for as long as he's gonna be. And on top of that, everybody else in that starting five, from Kobe to Zach and Ayo to some extent, and Vooch, if you throw it to him in post, can create some offensive mismatches. Now, you may not agree, but from what I see from watching these last 13 and 12 games, Giddey can definitely benefit from coming off the bench. And those are for the reasons I just told you. Anyway, tell me what you think. Peace.
Josh Giddey may need to go to the bench. Here's the thing. I've said this before. To me, it's not about just who starts. Like, yes, there is something to be made with Kobe and Ayo, and what they were able to do is how much they balanced themselves as a starting backcourt. But even then, it's still about how you manage the rotations, right? And even with moving Josh Giddey to the bench, this isn't hockey. You're not making whole lineup changes. So with Josh Giddey is going to play over 20, 25 minutes, he's still going to play the minutes with those starters. So it's not like he's going to play just as minutes with Dalen, or just as minutes with Julian, or just as minutes with Jalen Smith. He's playing some minutes with those guys already, right? And so you can only cover up a player so much. Now, I do think that with better roster construction, you can do that. But right now, Giddey's weaknesses are going to be exposed one way or another. You can only hide that. If he's going to be playing more than 25 minutes, the weaknesses are going to be exposed. And, you can try to manage the lineups and rotations to try to help put the best players out there, right? But at the end of the day, good coaches to great coaches to X's and O's coaches to even just smart players, they're going to know who they need to attack out there on the court. And right now, that has been Josh Giddey. Now, there hasn't been a lot of games that were as bad as last night. Last night was terrible. But Josh Giddey has been bad defensively all season. And so we'll see what comes. We'll see what comes. All right, let's get into this next voicemail. This one's from Reginald.
Hey, this is Reginald from Columbus, Georgia. This is like the day before the Cleveland Cavs game rematch, and I was just wondering, what changes do you think the Bulls would do, well, Billy Donovan will do, in order to try to sneak a win past the Cavs? I know some people might say that Billy Donovan is slightly better with his substitutions and timeouts, but I think the only way to truly see that, if he's actually gotten any better, is see what adjustments he makes after he lost. Like, what did he learn? What did he do differently? And the adjustment he makes, make the team better and got to win. That is the ultimate result. But I know we're having whether or not Billy Donovan can make the adjustment an above average coach would make. But tell me your thoughts on that.
Billy Donovan and the adjustments, man. So you left this before the game last night, and I tell you what adjustments he made other than benching Josh Giddey? Nothing. And that continues to be a limitation of just who Billy Donovan is as a head coach. He's not the type of coach that's going to make these great adjustments to what other teams do. He does make some of them sometimes, and I got to give him credit, whether that's him, Wes Unseld, whoever it is, right? We make some sometimes, and I would say at the 13 games in the season, I probably saw more adjustments that Billy Donovan has made than probably in the first 25 games of last season, right? So there is that. There is some of that still trying to figure this thing out overall, but I think when it just comes down to it, like Billy Donovan is who Billy Donovan is. And the way that I always explain it is that every coach has a ceiling that they can get a team to. And I think that unless you make wholesale changes to this roster and get a surefire superstar, that Billy Donovan has probably coached this version of the Bulls roster to the capacity that he can. And that just is what it is, right? That's what I've personally seen from Billy Donovan over the last 4 years. That's my personal opinion. Not everybody has to share that, but that's just the impression that I get is that Billy Donovan is basically maxed out on what he can do. And I know this is a different roster, but I think that early on we're seeing that. That's my opinion. But hey, maybe Billy Donovan shows something that I'm wrong on that, and that wakes me up. Maybe. I'll leave an open mind to it, and we'll see what Billy Donovan does. All right, let's get into the last voicemail for today. This one's from Mike.
Yeah. Hey, Haize. So it's Mike. This is my third voicemail, and I'm answering the question you asked in the last episode about whether the Bulls should re-sign Josh Giddey. I was going to ask that question before your episode. My first voicemail was about the defensive schemes Wes Unseld might be running. The second one was about the defensive potential of the young core, and I expressed concerns about Giddey. Now, a few games into the season, I still have those concerns. I think, he's just so slow with his lateral movement. The teams are constantly hunting him as the weakest link. I think it really, I know the analytics are hard to read, but just the eye test, it seems like it is limiting the potential of the defense, which I think is very important, especially since you need to get stops to then get back in transition. So I would say that for me, the real question is, how much does he improve his defense between now and the end of the year? And if I'm AK, I'll just be using a lot of analytics, looking at different lineups with different people, looking at not only the analytics, but the eye test of how he does defensively and whether or not he's a viable option. Because I think he's going to be a very good offensive player. He already is a good offensive player. I think his shot is going to continue to improve gradually each year. His turnovers will go down each year. Hopefully he'll improve his finishing at the rim. But I personally just wouldn't want to have a guard like that is such a liability defensively unless he improves, especially since it's hard to construct. If we had Wembanyama and if it were a different team construction, then maybe. But as you were saying, we've got Io and Kobe, and so really looking at those lineups to see if it works defensively. That's a big question. But let me know what you think.
Okay, I completely understand what you're saying. How much Josh Giddey improves on the defensive side of the ball, and if Josh Giddey can become a solid defender, that does change everything. But here's what I'm going to say as a caveat. It's also to how you're going to build this roster, because if the Bulls had an athletic center that can actually switch defensively, that can rim protect, and I'm not saying that this is an easy player to go out there and get, but I think that player would help this team overall a lot. If you had one of those centers that when people get by your guards, he's right there because he can rotate, he can use his length, he can shot block, right? And that they're athletic to where they can get out and run in the open court, and Josh Giddey can use his passing to get them looks, to get them lobs, things like that. I think that could be huge for Josh Giddey and for the team. So it's not just about how much Josh Giddey can improve, because roster construction is a thing that's important. It's also about if AK and Eversley decide to sign Josh Giddey to a long-term contract, okay, then what are you going to do with this roster to help kind of overcome some of the shortcomings that Josh Giddey is going to have as a defender? Now, if he can start working on those and become better, then great, right? Josh Giddey's talked about how he wants to be a two-way player and the importance of being that. But sometimes players just don't have the skill to do it. And we'll see if that's what the case is for Josh Giddey. Signs are pointing to that, but we'll see. But, I mean, great voicemail, great insight, great perspective. But I think just that added perspective to that is also, what do you do with the rest of the roster? Because if you do, like as you move on from Vooch and get, if we get Malik in here from Duke or something like that, I think that's the type of player that if he hits his potential, then you can overcome a lot of kind of what the weak perimeter defense is for the Chicago Bulls. Like Joakim Noah helped with our Bulls team for a lot of years. So there's what I thought, but let me know what you guys think down below. Make sure you guys are following the show at Bulls Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns. bullscentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that's thanks to you lovely and beautiful people. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.